So this is the next of our videos about King Lear, looking at section by section in preparation for AQA English Literature A-Level Paper 1, the tragedy paper. And now we're going to look at a sequence that was used on the exam in 2020. It's around Act 2, Scene 4, about line 240 to 282 or 283, thereabouts. And what we see here, if we locate the passage first of all, is this is the end of Act 2. Everybody's come together, really. The subplot and the main plot interact a little bit here in that everybody arrives at Gloucester's castle. Regan and Cornwall have left their castle in order to avoid the approaching Lear. Kent and Oswald have gone looking for Regan and Cornwall. They've got their messages, and then they've realised that the place that they're going is Gloucester's castle, so they've arrived there too. Inside the castle is Edmund and Gloucester. As in this scene, King Lear himself arrives too with the fool. Kent, meanwhile, is in the stocks. So it's the culmination, really, of everything coming together and the power shifts that are in action here. And what we see in this little sequence is what's sometimes called the Dutch or reverse auction, in which Regan and Goneril sort of compete to say who will have the fewer nights to stay with them if he's to go back to their household. And it's basically a sort of undercutting and cutting down of Lear's power and strength and authority in a very visual way, a very dramatic way, as Goneril and Regan sort of gang up on him, circling, if you like, hover around him, and basically reinforce that he's finished, that he has no power or authority. So the narrative will see that happen, and we'll see Lear make an impassioned speech about that everybody has to have in their life more than they need, more than basic needs. So it's this question which had just been raised in the previous scene, which was where Edgar was reduced to nothing. Edgar I Nottingham, he says, reducing him down to this bedlam beggar. And here Lear confronts that idea that it may be about to happen to him too, that he too may be about to be reduced to nothing. And he suggests, rather appositely really, that does not constitute human existence, really, if you reduce a human being to his bare animal essence. So the tragedy here is unfolding rapidly, as we've seen throughout these early scenes, and we'll see that what's taking place here is the tragic consequences of fatal errors. So the bit that we start with is where Goneril turns to Lear and says, "Why might not you, my lord, receive attendance from those that she calls servants, or from mine? So we have servants, why don't you just use them? You don't need extra people around you." So they seem in some ways to have a reasonable point, that you don't need all these followers. Regan chips in too, and so the two of them ganging up on him, really, a kind of reversal, if we want to connect it to other parts of the play, a reversal of the opening scene in which the two of them work together to flatter him. Now the two of them work together to diminish him and destroy him, really, and to order him around. But Regan tries to be reasonable. She says, there's good reason to follow this policy of having our servants, that we'll control them. And she'd mentioned that she could have 50 nights stay with her, but now she says she starts to cut it down. I entreat you to bring but 5 and 20. So they're starting to reduce the number that they're prepared to take. They're undercutting each other. They're cutting him away. And Lear's forward answer, which is presumably interrupted by Regan rather sharply, "I gave you all," sort of very plaintive. "I've given you everything." It's a sudden moment of realisation, really. We have to see that kind of open-armed, rather kind of wide-eyed wonder about his performance at this moment. He can't believe quite what's happening. He seems to be caught out completely. And as I say, Regan's answer, And in Good Time You Gave It is so rapid, it doesn't allow him to say any more. It cuts across, it interrupts him. And it's vicious, isn't it? I gave you all, yeah, and you about time too. So there's no sympathy there. There's just a sort of sense of righteousness. And he carries on as if she hasn't cut that line in there and says, I made you guardians, depositories, but I did say that I had to have this number of nights. And so he asks, and again, he's now sort of plaintive and begging in the way that perhaps they were more so to begin with. Can I only have 25 nights? That's it. No more with me. The answer reminds us of the way that Lear is with Cordelia in the first scene, very dismissive and very certain, but also a little bit like Cordelia herself, a very short answer. Here, short answer means power. She's very calm and collected and knows exactly what she wants. She doesn't need to explain, she doesn't need to elaborate, she doesn't need to persuade. Lear shows that he hasn't really learnt his lesson yet, because he says, okay, in the next speech here, I'll go with Goneril then, because you're 50, you'll let me have 50 men. She's only wanting 25. Therefore, thou art twice her love. So it is right back to that first scene in which the total misjudgment about what love is, and it's a completely mistaken idea that you can measure love, and that you can say, oh, you must love me twice as much because you've been offered me twice as many men to stay. That love is measurable like that. In another play by Shakespeare, not dissimilar time to this, Antony and Cleopatra, he says there's beggary in the love that can be measured. There's something wrong with any love that can be measured out in numbers and figures. That's not how love works, and you're a fool if you think it is. You're going to be fooled and conned if you think that you're going to fall in love with somebody because they buy you a bigger present than someone else. That's not how love works. Now we get Goneril's reply. What need you have 5, 20, 10 or 5, 5 and 20, 10 or 5 to follow? When twice so many have a command to tend you, we've got double that number of servants anyway. Why do you need any of these? So again, the cutting down, let's go from 25 to 10 to 5, and then the final sort of doom-laden, bell-like tolling of what need one from Regan. Brilliantly simple dismissal of everything that Lear might own and everything that he thinks he stands for. He's mistaken in thinking that he stands for these things. He thinks that these things matter and that he can be valued by these things above all else. How many men I've got with me is how valuable I am. But he gives this response which is quite thoughtful, although a bit impassioned too. And this is where our sequence finishes with Lear's big speech here. Oh, reason, not the need. So don't tell me about what I need. And then he mentions that basis beggar. So base is a word that Edgar and Edmund both use in their own soliloquies. So the lowest of the people like Edgar, we've just seen, and we're going to see a lot more of in Act 3, they are, in their poorest things, superfluous. Even the basest beggars have some things they don't need. A few rags of clothes, you can argue that you don't need those clothes. Man's life's as cheap as beasts. So this argument, which the whole play is operating on, and one reason why there are 57 different species of animals mentioned in the play is to emphasize this. What's the difference between a human being and an animal? Clothes, shelter, entertainment, the ability to communicate on a sophisticated level. All of these things actually don't correspond to what we need to survive. They are more what we want and what make our lives meaningful and purposeful. And he gives a good example. He says that Regan or Goneril, you wear these gorgeous clothes, but you don't wear them to keep you warm. You wear them because they look nice. So it's not about need, is it? There's more than need in human life. can see his speech then starting to break up. He's going to try to argue a case, but he actually isn't quite capable of doing that philosophically anymore. So he says, "You heavens, give me patience, patience I need." And so he stops arguing this case and starts to think about his own state, because he's becoming angry and perhaps mentally ill. He can feel his sort of sense of selfhood slipping from him. He makes this presentation of himself then. In the remainder of the speech, he talks about how sad he is and how broken he is. Now, it depends how you play it, doesn't it? Because in earlier scenes, he's put on a bit of an act, a performance for sarcastic and joking reasons. So here, is he still putting on an act? Is he going over the top really a bit here? Or do we actually think that he's expressing his genuine sort of sense of brokenness? Talks about the gods. Again, worth noting that all the good characters keep talking about the gods. It doesn't seem to help them very much. But he says, "I'm a poor old man, full of grief as age, wretched in both. If it be that you stir these daughters' hearts against their father, fool me not so much to bear it tamely, touch me with noble anger, let not women's drops." Notice how we're in that patriarchal culture here. He thinks tears represent femininity and he's ashamed of that. This is obviously part of the mistake that this society makes. They value a certain kind of masculinity, which is not very helpful. His anger and bitterness perhaps coming from that. But he's calling to the gods and saying, if it's your fault, please, give me this noble anger. And then he turns and he calls them unnatural hags. And it takes us back to Act 1, Scene 4, when Goneril was the victim of his really vicious attack when he talks about wishing that she would be made sterile. So unnatural, of course, another word that's constantly nature, natural, being played upon in the play. To what extent is their behaviour natural? Perhaps it is natural, really, to the younger animals to supplant the older animal, within the pride of lions or the pack of wolves. But for human beings, we're supposed to be kind of a little bit more compassionate to the elderly, not just to dump them when they become less useful. But he says now, and again it shows his weakness and perhaps allows us some sympathy, "I'll have such revenges on you both, that all the world shall, I will do such things, what they are, yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth." So he says, "I'm going to do some stuff to you. God, I'm going to get you back. Wait and see." It's that horrible empty threat of somebody who wants to impose their power but realises they're powerless. "Oh, wait, I'm going to do something. What are you going to do to me?" Well, there's nothing he can do. He has no authority, he has no power. There's a suggestion already that a lot of his followers have dwindled away and are not there anymore. That's said earlier in the scene when Kent sort of says, "Well, where's all his men?" He says, haven't you worked, the fool says to him, "Haven't you worked that out yet? That they've run away because they realise he's not in power anymore and he can't really give us anything. His followers, his hangers-on. You think I'll weep? No, I'll not weep." And that line's a half line suggesting he does kind of weep or sob or fight back the tears. But then he says, I'll break into 1,000 flaws before I'll weep. And then he turns to the fool and says, "Oh, fool, I shall go mad," which is sweet and interesting, isn't it? That it's the fool that he looks to for compassion. Not Kent, who's a bit too rough and ready, and not Gloucester, who's a bit too much of a fool really a fool, but the fool is like a kind of child to him, perhaps, but a child that doesn't hate him and turn on him. But "I shall go mad, he'll break into 1,000 flaws," that sense of his fracturing personality here. And we see the note below, storm and tempest. So that storm is building up through this sequence. And the storm is in his head, of course, and we play upon that in Act 3, as we'll see. But the storm is also, his mental health breaking down so that he can't anymore speak coherently. So there's an effort to make an argument which sort of fails and breaks down into an emotional outburst and then empty threats and then a feeling that he's going mad and a loss of articulacy almost altogether. So we see this as the breakdown of Lear in many ways. He's been removed from power, he's having people removed from him, and now he leaves the scene. And in fact, just after that, Cornwall says, "Let us withdraw, 'twill be a storm." That callous heartlessness of, It's going to be cold and wet out here, let's go inside. And there's no effort to cajole Lear back in and say, come and get into safety. They're quite happy to see him leave. Quite possibly, I suppose, assuming that he may not survive out there. An old man over 80 out in a storm, and his health will be under threat. So, the power and the directness and the force of Regan Goneril, the desperate, hopeless brokenness of Lear, and a sense that this is what the tragedy has led him to. This is what his bad, stupid mistake in the beginning of the play has led him to. And now he is acting out what he's talked about there as being, he's going to be like one of those basest beggars. He's going to be like the animal. He's going to expose himself out there to the elements, and he's going to have no protection, no human accoutrements to offer shelter from the storm. And the possibilities here are not good, are they? It looks like Lear is spiralling towards an unhappy end.